The morning of February 11th, I walked into the lobby of Mercer and Holt Creative carrying a laptop bag that wasn't mine. It was too big for my frame. The left shoulder strap was held together with a binder clip I'd found in my kitchen drawer at 11 the night before. The leather along the bottom seam was cracked and peeling in a way that made it look like it had been dragged across a parking lot a few too many times. And sitting in that clean, warm-lit reception area, surrounded by people in fitted blazers and clean shoes, I felt exactly like what my family had always told me I was. Someone who couldn't quite pull it together. I'd signed in at the front desk, taken a seat in the waiting area, and set the bag on the chair beside me. The receptionist glanced at it, not at me, at the bag. Quick, polite, professional. The kind of look someone gives when they're trained not to react, but react anyway. 12 minutes later, a woman walked out from the back hallway. Renata Holt, founding partner. I had spent 2 full weeks researching her before this meeting. Mid-50s, dark blazer, no jewelry except small gold studs. She shook my hand and looked at me the way people do when they're quietly comparing what's in front of them to what they expected to find. Then she looked at the bag. Her eyes stopped on it. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Then she looked back at my face and something in her expression shifted. Not pity. Something slower and more deliberate. Like 2 separate things she'd been holding in different parts of her mind had just clicked together. She reached into the front zipper pocket of the bag before I even sat down. I don't know why I didn't stop her. Maybe because she moved like someone who already knew what she'd find. She pulled out a laminated business card from the inner sleeve. White card, clean font. The name on it was not mine. Vanessa Reeves, Senior Content Director, Mercer and Holt Creative. Renata held the card between 2 fingers and looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at me. "Interesting," she said, and her voice had a quality I couldn't name right then. Not warmth, not coldness, precision. Like someone who had just decided to be very careful about what she said next. "Sit down," she said. "We have a lot to cover." I didn't know yet that Vanessa worked in that building, 3 floors directly above the room where I was about to pitch the most important freelance contract of my career. I didn't know yet that the bag my mother had handed me the night before with a tight smile and the words, "Use your sister's, yours looks like a student bag," wasn't a thoughtless suggestion. I didn't know yet that it had been planned, but I was about to find out all of it. My name is Nadia Reeves. I'm 31 years old. I'm a brand copywriter based in Austin, Texas. And for the past 5 years, I have been quietly building something real, while my family spent that same time confidently explaining to anyone who asked why I probably wouldn't. If you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to know you best, I need you to stay with me for this one. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. I'd genuinely love to know. And if any part of what I'm about to tell you sounds familiar, hit subscribe. I don't post often, but when I do, it's because something is worth saying. The word I want you to drop in the comments today is this one: seen. If you have ever felt invisible to the people closest to you, just drop that word below. I'll come back to it later and tell you why I picked it. All right, let me start from the beginning. I grew up in a 2-story house on the east side of Austin. My parents are Carol and Gary Reeves. Mom ran the front office at a mid-sized law firm downtown for 18 years. Dad managed a commercial construction crew. They weren't struggling. They owned the house outright by the time I was 12. 2 cars, a covered porch they had rescreened twice, a backyard big enough for a garden my mother never planted. We were comfortable. There was money. It just wasn't distributed the way the word comfortable usually implies. My sister Vanessa is 4 years older than me. She was always the one who knew how to work a room. Teachers loved her. Neighbors loved her. Extended family talked about her at every gathering like she was a weather event. Vanessa did this. Vanessa got that. Did you hear what Vanessa accomplished? She had a way of presenting herself that made adults trust her immediately. My mother called it maturity. I called it performance, but I didn't have that word for it until much later. Vanessa went to the University of Texas at Austin straight out of high school. Communications degree, 4-year program. My parents paid for all of it. Tuition, housing, a new MacBook, a campus meal plan, a car for her junior year because the bus schedule wasn't working for her internship. I remember the day they bought it, a Saturday in March. My parents drove back from the dealership with a silver Honda Civic and a big plastic bow they'd bought at Party City. Vanessa cried, my mother cried. My father looked happier than I'd seen him in 2 years. I was 14, and I sat on the porch steps and watched them take pictures with the car. When it was my turn to talk about college, I was 17. I was a solid student, not the kind who made it onto plaques in the hallway, but a 3.4 GPA and a genuine interest in writing. I'd started a small copywriting blog when I was 15, writing about local businesses, branding, marketing trends. Nothing that would get featured anywhere, but people read it. By the time I was a junior, I had around 2,000 regular readers, which felt significant when you're 17 and writing from your childhood bedroom after homework. I sat down with my parents in October of my junior year. I had a list of schools. UT Austin was on it. So was Texas State, UT San Antonio, a few others. I had cost breakdowns printed out. I had a plan. My mother looked at the list and said, "Nadia, we just don't have the same flexibility we had when Vanessa was starting. Everything's gone up. You know how things are right now." I didn't ask what things. I already knew the answer wasn't going to change. Austin Community College had a strong marketing communications track, she told me. Lots of smart people start there and transfer. It doesn't mean anything about your future. She said that last part twice. It doesn't mean anything. I enrolled at ACC that fall. 2-year program, marketing communications. I worked part-time at a copy and print shop on South Congress, 18 hours a week, handling layout jobs and client proofing. I paid my own textbooks, my own transit pass, half my phone bill from the second semester onward. I didn't ask for help because I'd already learned what asking looked like in our family. It looked like a pause, then a redirect to what Vanessa needed that month. Vanessa graduated from UT the spring I started ACC. My parents threw her a party, 43 people in the backyard, actual catering, not potluck, string lights in the oak trees, a graduation cake with a tiny fondant diploma on top that my mother had special ordered from a bakery on 6th Street. I helped carry chairs from the garage and wash serving dishes after the guests left. Nobody asked how my first semester had gone. I finished my program at ACC in May, 2 years later. I turned 20 that summer. My mother said we'll celebrate this weekend, something small. The weekend came. We ordered pizza. My dad watched a baseball game. My mother asked if I wanted garlic bread. That was the celebration. I'm not telling you this to make them sound cruel. That's the important part. There was no cruelty in the dramatic sense, no shouting, no obvious rejection. The damage in families like mine is quieter than that. It lives in the things that never happen, the questions nobody thinks to ask, the acknowledgments that just don't come. It looks like an ordinary evening. It just leaves a mark anyway. After ACC, I built my career the way people without connections and without a safety net usually have to. One small step at a time, with my own money and my own time and nobody watching. I took a free copywriting course online, then a brand strategy course through a marketing platform I paid for myself, $340, which was most of my savings that month. I started picking up small freelance jobs, product descriptions, email campaigns for local businesses, website copy for a yoga studio, a dog groomer, a family-run hardware store on Burnett Road. I was not glamorous, I was not fast, but I was good and I got better. By 23, I had a rate card and a basic website. By 25, I had 6 steady clients and a portfolio I was genuinely proud of. By 27, I was bringing in $4,800 a month on average, sometimes more, and I hadn't asked my parents for a single dollar in 3 years. None of them knew any of this. Not the income, not the clients, not the work. At family dinners, I didn't talk about what I was doing because nobody asked. The conversation at our table had a fixed shape. My dad talked about the job site. My mom relayed something from the law firm, and then we talked about Vanessa. Her title, her projects, her lease renewal, her opinion on whatever was in the news that week. Vanessa was the subject of every dinner, present or not. I ate my food and drove home to my apartment alone. There was a Sunday dinner 2 years ago when I tried, just once, to be part of the conversation. Vanessa was describing a rebrand project her team was leading. A regional restaurant group, full identity refresh, voice and visuals across all their locations. It sounded similar to a project I had finished the previous year. A small hotel group, 4 properties, complete brand voice overhaul. Their email open rates had gone up 31% in the first quarter after the relaunch. I'd been proud of that number. I'd earned it. I said, "That's actually similar to something I finished last year. A hotel group, 4 locations, full brand voice rebuild." Vanessa looked at me. "Freelance?" "Yeah." She picked up her fork. "That's different. Corporate brand work has a lot more structure, different scale entirely." My mother nodded slowly. "Vanessa's right. What she handles involves a whole team and stakeholder management. It's more complex." I didn't say anything after that. I ate my green beans and listened to the rest of the table move forward without me. That's what it was always like. No cruelty, no meanness that you could point at and name, just a quiet, reflexive dismissal, the kind that doesn't even notice itself doing it. I drove home that night and sat at my desk and looked at my client folder. 16 active projects, 3 long-term retainers, a brand positioning guide I'd just delivered for a tech startup that had used it to close a seed round of $2.2 million, in part because their messaging had finally stopped confusing people. I looked at all of it and heard my mother's voice. "That's different. It's more complex." I closed my laptop, I got a glass of water, I went to bed. Here's the thing nobody prepares you for when you grow up as the invisible one. All that quiet, all those years of nobody asking, nobody looking your way, it gives you something unexpected, it gives you an enormous amount of undisturbed time. And I used every single hour of it. Let me tell you what my family didn't know about me. And I mean didn't know in the specific sense. Not the way you don't know something because it never came up. The way you don't know something because the person stopped trying to tell you. I had been freelancing seriously since I was 22. Not hobby freelancing, not weekend side project freelancing. Actual work with actual clients, actual contracts, actual invoices that got paid on time because I followed up on them myself. I built the whole thing from a laptop I bought refurbished for $480 off a resale site. A free Squarespace template I eventually replaced with a custom site I paid a developer friend $600 to build, and a writing process I had refined over 4 years of doing it wrong and then doing it better. My focus was brand copywriting. Specifically, I helped small and mid-sized companies figure out how to talk about themselves. Their website copy, their brand voice guide, their email sequences, their pitch decks, the words that companies use when they want to sound like they know what they're doing. A lot of companies don't know how to do that on their own. That's where I came in. By the time I was 25, I had figured out my niche. I worked primarily with founder-led businesses, companies where one person had built something real but couldn't explain it clearly to anyone outside their own head. I was good at translating. I was good at sitting across from someone who'd built a business from scratch and finding the version of their story that actually connected with the people they were trying to reach. I started raising my rates in late 2021. I'd been undercharging for 2 years, and I knew it. I moved my project minimum to $2,200 and my monthly retainer rate to $3,400. I lost 2 clients who wanted to stay at my old pricing. I picked up 4 new ones within 6 weeks who didn't blink at the new numbers. That told me everything I needed to know. By the spring of 2022, I was averaging $5,600 a month. Some months closer to $7,000 when a larger project came in. I had a waiting list for the first time in March of that year. 3 people. Waiting. For me. I sat with that for a minute before I moved on to the next deadline. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in the Muller neighborhood that May. Not because I needed the extra room, but because I finally could. I set up the second bedroom as a proper office, a real desk, not the folding table I'd been using since ACC. A monitor, a good chair, a lamp I picked out because I liked it, not because it was the cheapest one. I painted the wall behind the desk a dark green. I hung 2 prints I'd bought from an artist at a local market. Total cost for the whole setup was $1,840. I paid cash. I didn't tell my family I had moved. My mother found out 6 weeks later when she sent a card to my old address, and it came back. She called, slightly offended, and I gave her the new address. She said, "Oh, Muller, that's a nice area. Can you afford that?" I said yes. She said, "Okay, well, don't overextend yourself." Then she told me Vanessa had just gotten a new title at her job. Senior something. She couldn't remember the exact words, but it sounded important. I said that was great. I hung up. In September of 2022, I landed the biggest project I'd taken on up to that point. A software company based in Austin, 12 employees, Series A funding just closed. They needed a full brand voice overhaul, new website copy, an investor update email sequence, and a positioning document for their sales team. Total contract value was $14,500, paid in 2 installments. The second one cleared on October 3rd, and I sat at my green-walled desk and looked at my bank account for about 4 minutes before I went and made coffee. That project led to 2 referrals. One of them turned into a 6-month retainer. The other was a smaller one-time project that didn't go anywhere. But they left me a written testimonial that I still have on my website. I had a folder on my desktop I'd labeled simply Work. Inside it were subfolders for every client, every contract, every delivered project. 41 completed projects by the time February rolled around. 41. I had never once mentioned that number at a family dinner. Not because I was hiding it exactly, but because nobody had ever asked a question that would have led me there. Have you ever realized that the people in your life never ask you about your work? Not in the vague, how's it going way that's really just a greeting. I mean the real question. The what are you working on? How does it work? What are you proud of question. If someone in your life has never asked you that, drop the word seen in the comments below. I want to know how many of you are out there, because that was my life. Nobody in my family had ever asked me what I was proud of. Not once in 5 years of building something real. My Aunt Patricia was the only exception. She was my mom's younger sister, a middle school art teacher who lived in San Marcos and drove a 10-year-old Subaru with a bumper sticker from a folk music festival. She called me every few weeks, usually on Sunday evenings, and she actually asked, "How's the work going? Tell me about a client. What are you learning right now?" She listened to the answers. She remembered things I'd told her in previous calls. She said once, "Nadia, you've built something most people your age haven't figured out yet. I hope you know that." I didn't have many people in my corner, but I had her, and that Sunday call was usually the thing that kept the week from feeling completely isolating. The family dinners continued, every third Sunday more or less. Same house, same seats, same conversation structure. My dad would pour the drinks. My mom would finish cooking while we all sat and waited. Vanessa would arrive exactly 10 minutes late, which somehow always felt like an entrance rather than a delay. She'd come in with a story ready, something about work, something her boss had said, some project that was going well, and the table would orient toward her the way plants orient toward light. Naturally, without thinking, just the way things had always worked. One dinner in particular stands out, November last year. I remember because it was 2 days after I delivered a full rebrand package to a client, a women's wellness brand out of Dallas, and they'd sent me a written review that used the word transformative to describe what I'd done for their messaging. I'd read that word a few times. Transformative. I saved the email in a folder. At dinner that Sunday, my mother announced that Vanessa had been asked to lead a new mentorship initiative at her company. They were selecting senior staff to coach junior employees on career development. Vanessa had been chosen as one of 4 mentors firm-wide. Everyone reacted as if Vanessa had been nominated for something national. My dad said, "That's something." My mother said, "They clearly see what we always saw." My uncle, who was visiting from San Antonio, raised his glass. I said, "That's great, Vanessa. Congratulations." Vanessa smiled, the smile she always gave me, warm on the surface, with something underneath it that I'd never been able to name exactly, something that felt like management, like she was managing how much of my acknowledgement she accepted. "Thanks, Nadia. It's a lot of responsibility, but I think I can handle it." My mother looked at me then, that particular look she had, the one that said, "See, this is what things look like when you do them right." She didn't say it out loud. She didn't have to. 20 years of that look had made it fluent. I helped clear the dishes after dinner. I was at the sink when my mother came in carrying the serving bowls. She set them on the counter next to me and said, kind of quietly, the way she said things she'd been holding on to for a while, "You know, Nadia, I just hope you're thinking about stability. Freelancing is fine when you're young, but it's not really a career path, not long term. I kept washing. I'm doing okay, Mom. I know you're doing okay. I just mean structure, benefits. Vanessa has a 401k now. She has vacation days. She picked up a dish towel. You don't want to be figuring it all out when you're 40. I'm 31. I know how old you are. She dried a bowl. I'm just saying, think ahead. I dried my hands. I went back to the table and had dessert and listened to my uncle talk about traffic on 35. I drove home at 8:15. I checked my business account when I got in. Balance, $23,400, plus the retainer that would hit on the 1st of next month. I didn't say anything about it. There was no conversation where I could have said it that would have landed the way it deserved to. In my family, that number would have been received as either a surprise they'd immediately minimize or a threat to the story they'd been telling about me for the past decade. Either way, I would have left that conversation feeling worse than when I walked in. So I kept it to myself. I kept all of it to myself. I was building something and I was building it quietly, and honestly, I had stopped needing them to know. What I hadn't stopped needing, and this took me a long time to admit, was for them to ask, not to be told. Just to have someone in that house look at me across a table and say, "So what are you working on?" and mean it. They never did. Then in late January, a project referral came through from a client I'd worked with 8 months earlier. A brand consultancy in Austin was looking for a freelance copywriter to lead a content strategy overhaul. 6-month contract, full scope. The referral came with a name and a company, Mercer and Holt Creative. I looked them up. Strong portfolio, well-regarded firm, exactly the kind of work I'd been building toward. I submitted my materials on a Tuesday afternoon. I got a response within 48 hours. Renata Holt would like to schedule an exploratory meeting. I told my mother about it at the next Sunday dinner, not the company name. Just that I had a big meeting coming up, a potential 6-month contract, the largest scope project I'd ever pitched. She passed the breadbasket to my dad. That sounds good. Just don't put all your eggs in one basket. What if it doesn't come through? Then I keep working. I'm just saying, have a backup. I always have a backup, Mom. That's how freelancing works. She nodded like she'd heard me, but hadn't quite. Well, good luck. That was the full conversation. 30 seconds. Then she turned to ask Vanessa about an email she'd sent about Thanksgiving plans. I drove home that night and printed my portfolio samples. I organized them into a clean presentation folder. I ironed the blazer I planned to wear. I set my laptop bag by the door so I wouldn't forget it in the morning. At 9:40 that night, my phone buzzed. My mother. She said she'd been thinking, and my portfolio bag did look a bit worn. Vanessa had left an old laptop bag at the house after her last visit. Really good quality, professional looking. I should just take it for the meeting. No reason to walk in looking like a student when I could look put together. I almost said no. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I thought she was genuinely trying to help for once. I said, okay, I'll pick it up tomorrow. I drove over in the morning. My mother handed me the bag with a smile that I now understand was not the smile I thought it was. I said thanks. I drove to my meeting. I signed in at the front desk at Mercer and Holt Creative at 9:52 in the morning, set the bag on the chair beside me, and waited. And then Renata Holt walked out and reached into the front pocket and pulled out Vanessa's business card. And everything that I thought was just bad luck turned out to be something else entirely. Renata Holt held that business card between 2 fingers and looked at it the way you look at something that confirms a suspicion you've been sitting with for a while. She didn't say anything right away. She set the card down on the table between us, face up, so the name was visible to both of us. Vanessa Reeves, Senior Content Director. Then she looked at me. How do you know Vanessa? She's my sister, I said. Renata was quiet for about 4 seconds. She picked up her pen, set it back down. She didn't mention she had a sister in copywriting. I told her I hadn't known Vanessa worked here until about 60 seconds ago. Renata looked at the card again. She nodded once, slowly, like she was filing something away. Then she opened the folder in front of her and said, "All right, let's talk about your work." The meeting lasted 50 minutes. She asked about my process, my approach to brand voice, how I handled clients who didn't know what they wanted. I answered all of it. I was prepared, and I knew I was prepared. When she asked me to walk her through a past project in detail, I talked her through the Dallas Wellness brand, the before and after, what the messaging had been doing wrong, and what we changed and why. She asked 3 follow-up questions. Good ones, the kind that tell you the other person is actually listening. At the end, she stood and shook my hand. She said she'd be in touch within the week. She said my portfolio was strong. She said it the way people say things when they mean them and don't need to elaborate. I walked back through the lobby. The receptionist smiled. I pushed through the glass door and stood on the sidewalk outside and took a long breath. Then I pulled out my phone and typed Vanessa Reeves Mercer and Holt Creative into the search bar. The company website had a team page. I found her in about 10 seconds. Headshot, professional, studio lighting, the kind of photo that costs money and looks like it. Below the photo, her title, Senior Content Director. And below that, a bio. I read the first line. I grew up in a household where there was never quite enough, and I learned early that words were the only currency I actually had. I stopped. I read it again. I grew up in a household where there was never quite enough. I scrolled down. I put myself through community college while working part-time at a print shop, learning layout and production on the job. I didn't have connections or a family safety net. I had a library card and a willingness to outwork everyone around me. Brand copywriting wasn't a career I chose. It was the thing I built because nothing else was handed to me. I stood on that sidewalk and read that paragraph 3 times. Community college, part-time at a print shop, learning layout on the job, no family safety net. That was my life. Word for word, detail for detail, that was my actual life. I went to ACC. I worked at a print shop on South Congress. I learned layout on that job. My family had never offered me a safety net. I had never had one. Vanessa went to UT Austin. Our parents paid for everything. She had never worked at a print shop. She had never had to. She had taken my story and put her name on it. She hadn't borrowed the shape of it. She hadn't loosely adapted it. She had lifted it whole, changed nothing that mattered, and used it to build her identity inside one of the better creative firms in Austin. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and didn't start the engine for a few minutes. I wasn't crying. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't falling apart. I was doing something that felt more like calibrating. Like when your eyes adjust to a different level of light, and suddenly you can see the room you've been standing in the whole time. I drove home. I made coffee. I sat at my desk. I opened Vanessa's full bio again and read the whole thing. Every detail she had claimed traced back to something I had actually lived. The part-time job, the community college, the self-teaching, the no safety net. Even the framing, the idea that writing was something she'd built out of necessity rather than privilege, that was mine. I had said those exact words to my Aunt Patricia on a Sunday call about 2 years ago. I remembered saying them. Words were the one thing I always had, even when I didn't have much else. I didn't know yet how long the bio had been on the website. I didn't know yet how many meetings, how many client pitches, how many internal reviews Vanessa had walked into carrying my story as her own. But I was starting to understand that what I'd mistaken for years as my family simply not paying attention had not been inattention at all. I texted my friend Simone. She was a project manager who'd been at a different Austin firm for 3 years. We'd met at a freelancer networking event in 2021 and stayed close. She knew the local agency world well. I typed, "Do you know anything about Mercer and Holt? Specifically about a content director there named Vanessa Reeves?" She replied in 4 minutes. "Oh, I know the name. Why?" "She's my sister. I just found her company bio." 3 dots. Then, "Nadia, I think we need to talk." We met that evening at a coffee shop on East Cesar Chavez. Simone got there first and had already ordered. She looked at me when I sat down with the expression of someone who has been waiting to say something for a while, but wasn't sure it was her place. "How long has she been using that story?" I asked. Simone wrapped both hands around her cup. "I heard it about a year ago at an industry panel. She was on a speaker panel about non-traditional paths into brand work. She told the whole thing. Community college, print shop, taught herself everything. No family support. The room loved it. She got a standing question from the moderator about resilience." Simone paused. "I didn't know she was your sister then. I didn't put it together until just now." I nodded. "There's something else," Simone said. She set her cup down carefully. "I know someone who was in Vanessa's onboarding cohort at Mercer and Holt 4 years ago. She told me once that Vanessa's whole thing from day one was the self-made narrative. Renata apparently values people who've built themselves without a lot of help. It's part of the firm's culture, something about honoring the work over the pedigree, and Vanessa walked in with that story ready. She built a career on it," I said. "My career, my story, my community college, my print shop." Simone looked at me steadily. "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer right away. I was thinking about something she'd said. Renata values people who built themselves without a lot of help. And Renata had looked at me across that table today with an expression I hadn't been able to name. Now I thought I could. She'd been comparing the person sitting across from her and the story she'd been told for 4 years, and something hadn't matched up. I told Simone I wasn't sure yet. I told her I'd figure it out. I drove to my parents' house that Friday evening for what I told my mother was a quick visit. She was in the kitchen when I arrived. My dad was in the garage. The house was quiet. My mother offered me tea, and I said yes. And while she filled the kettle, I looked at her phone sitting face down on the kitchen counter. She went to the pantry to get the tea bags. I had maybe 2 minutes. I picked up the phone. No passcode. My mother had never used one. Nothing to hide, no reason to lock it. She'd said that once, years ago, and I'd never forgotten it. I opened her messages. I scrolled to Vanessa's name. The thread went back months. I scrolled to January, the week after I'd mentioned my Mercer and Holt meeting at Sunday dinner. Vanessa's message was timestamped 11:23 p.m. on a Tuesday. "She's pitching at my firm, Mom. Renata doesn't know she's my sister. I need her to not make a strong impression. Tell her the bag she uses looks unprofessional, and offer her my old one, the broken one I left at your house. She'll take it if you make it sound like you're helping her. Don't tell her it's from me." I read it once, then again. Below it, my mother's reply. "Okay, I'll do it tomorrow when she picks it up." No hesitation, no "but, Vanessa, that's not right. No, she's your sister. Just, okay, I'll do it tomorrow." I scrolled up further. 2 weeks earlier, another message from Vanessa. "She's been talking about going after agency contracts. Try to redirect her. Tell her freelancing is better suited to where she is right now. She respects your opinion more than she lets on." My mother's reply. Already mentioned it at dinner. Told her to think about stability. She didn't push back. Already mentioned it. Like it was a task on a list. Like steering me away from my own ambitions was something she and Vanessa coordinated in advance, and then executed at the dinner table while I ate pot roast and nodded. I took 6 screenshots. My hands were steady. I put the phone back, face down on the counter, exactly where it had been. My mother came back with the tea bags. She hummed something while she put the kettle on. She asked if I was staying for dinner. I said no, just wanted to stop by. We had tea. She talked about a dispute at the law firm between 2 of the partners. I listened. I said the right things at the right moments. I hugged her when I left. I drove home and sat at my desk with the screenshots open on my phone. 6 images. Enough. I didn't call Vanessa. I didn't text her. The version of me from a year ago might have picked up the phone shaking, demanded an explanation, accepted the perfectly timed tears and the redirection, and driven home feeling like the problem again. Not this time. I had something I'd never had in any previous version of this situation. I had proof. And I had a sense that Renata Holt had already started asking her own questions. What I needed to do now was answer them. I opened my laptop. I pulled up Renata's email. I typed a short message. I told her there were some things relevant to our conversation that I thought she should know. I told her I had documentation. I asked if we could meet before she made any decisions about the contract. She replied at 7:40 the next morning. Monday, 9 a.m., my office. I closed the laptop. I looked at the wall in front of my desk. Dark green paint. The prints I'd picked out myself. The desk I'd chosen because I finally could. I thought about Vanessa walking into that firm 4 years ago with my story folded in her pocket like a boarding pass. I thought about every dinner where my mother had delivered lines that Vanessa had written for her. I thought about the bag with the broken clasp and the business card still tucked in the pocket. Vanessa's name, on a card, inside a bag she'd sent to sabotage me, at the firm where she built an entire reputation on the life I actually lived. I wasn't angry. That's the honest answer. I was past anger. Anger is loud, and it moves around. What I felt was quieter than that. Settled. The way things feel when you've been confused for a long time, and then suddenly, all at once, you're not. I set an alarm for 7. I laid out my clothes for Monday. My own blazer, my own bag. I went to sleep. Monday morning. I arrived at Mercer & Holt Creative at 8:52, 7 minutes early. I signed in at the front desk, took a seat, and waited. I was wearing my own blazer. Charcoal, fitted, bought from a boutique on South Congress 8 months ago when I'd closed the software company contract. My own bag, my own everything. Renata came out at 9 exactly. She didn't smile the way people smile when they're starting a casual meeting. She nodded and said, "Come on back," and I followed her through the main floor. Open desks, people already working, the low sound of keyboards and a conversation somewhere near the windows. We turned down a hallway and into a meeting room at the far end. The room had a glass wall facing the main floor. I noticed that. I noticed everything that morning. Renata sat across from me. Beside her was a woman she introduced as Joelle, the firm's operations director. Joelle had a legal pad, a pen, and the expression of someone who had been briefed in advance and was here to document, not to mediate. In the corner, slightly apart from the table, sat Simone. I looked at her. She gave me a small nod. Renata had called her the day before and asked her to be present, as someone who could speak to what she'd heard at the industry panel. Simone had said yes, without hesitating. Renata folded her hands on the table. "Tell me what you found." I didn't rush it. I laid it out the way I'd organized it in my head over the weekend. I started with the bio. I pulled up Vanessa's profile on my phone and read the key lines aloud. The community college, the print shop job, the no safety net framing. Then I told Renata what was actually true. My 2 years at ACC. My part-time job at the print shop on South Congress. My self-taught process. My real history. Renata listened without interrupting. Joelle wrote. Then I opened my screenshots. I set my phone on the table and turned it toward Renata. She read Vanessa's message first. "She's pitching at my firm, Mom. I need her to not make a strong impression. Tell her the bag she uses looks unprofessional, and offer her my old one, the broken one I left at your house. She'll take it if you make it sound like you're helping her." Renata read it twice. I watched her jaw tighten slightly. She passed the phone to Joelle without saying anything. Then she looked at me. "How long do you think this has been going on? The narrative?" I told her about the industry panel a year ago. Simone confirmed it from across the room. Voice calm, details specific. The panel title, the moderator's question, the standing response Vanessa had received. Simone had been in the audience. She remembered it because it had been compelling at the time. "I gave her a performance review 8 months ago," Renata said slowly. "She talked about this in detail. The print shop, the community college. I referenced it in her written review as an example of professional resilience." She paused. "I put it in writing. Joelle clicked her pen. Renata sat back. I need to verify the enrollment records. Give me 20 minutes. She and Joelle stepped out. Simone moved to the chair next to me. We didn't talk much. She got me a glass of water from the credenza and set it in front of me, and I drank half of it. 18 minutes later, Renata came back alone. She sat down and opened her laptop and turned the screen toward me. An email from ACC's registrar office, timestamped 40 minutes ago. She had clearly sent that request before I'd even arrived. Lauren Nadia Reeves, enrolled fall semester, 2-year marketing communications program. Graduated with a 3.6 GPA. The record was complete, verified, official. Below it, a second line in the email. No enrollment record found for Vanessa Carol Reeves in any program or semester. Renata closed the laptop. I'm going to ask Vanessa to come in. She picked up the desk phone and dialed an internal extension. When Vanessa answered, Renata said only, Can you come to meeting room C? Now, please? She hung up before Vanessa could ask why. We waited. About 90 seconds. The door opened and Vanessa walked in. She was dressed well. A fitted blazer, earrings, her hair pulled back the way she wore it for client days. She looked confident walking in. She looked like someone who owned the building. Then she saw me. The confidence didn't disappear. It shifted. Adjusted, the way a dial adjusts when you change the setting. She looked at Renata, then at Joelle, who had returned and was back in her corner with the legal pad, then at Simone, and then back at me. Her expression by the time she settled was something I'd seen before. Controlled concern. Measured worry. The version of her face she put on when she needed people to feel like she was the one who had been wronged. What's this about? She said. Her voice was steady. She sat down at the far end of the table, not across from me, slightly angled. Physical distance as strategy. Renata spoke first. I want to ask you about something in your company profile, specifically the section about your background, the community college, the print shop work, the way you've described building your career. Vanessa looked at Renata. Of course. What about it? I'd like you to walk me through it, in your own words. And Vanessa did. She launched into it the way she always launched into things she'd rehearsed. Smooth, detailed, emotionally calibrated. The household without enough, the community college paid for with her own savings, the print shop where she'd learned production work because she couldn't afford a real program. The process of teaching herself, because no one in her family had the connections to help her. She told it beautifully, I'll give her that. 4 years of telling it had made it seamless. Renata let her finish. Then she said, Vanessa, that's Nadia's life, not yours. The smoothness didn't crack all at once. It fractured at the edges first. A small tightening around her eyes. A breath that came a half second too late. That's not accurate, Vanessa said. Her voice was still level. Nadia and I had similar experiences growing up. We came from the same household. It's natural that our backgrounds would overlap. You went to UT Austin, I said, fully paid, by our parents. That doesn't mean I didn't struggle in other ways. You don't know everything about the print shop on South Congress, I said. That was my job. I worked there for 2 years, starting at 22. You have never worked there. I worked part-time in college, different jobs. The details aren't... There is no enrollment record for you at ACC, Renata said. I confirmed it this morning. Silence. The kind of silence that has weight to it. Joelle's pen was moving. Vanessa looked at the table. Something was happening behind her eyes. I could see her running through options, the way you run through exits, when you realize the door you came in through is no longer available. Then she looked up at me and did what she always did, what she'd done my entire life. I can't believe you came here and did this, she said. Her voice dropped to something quieter, more wounded. I have given you so much, Nadia. I've supported you. I've defended you to people at this firm who didn't even know your name. And you came in here to... I didn't come here for this. I said. You sent me here, in a broken bag with your old business card still in the pocket. That landed. I watched it land. Renata reached for the conference phone at the center of the table. She dialed a number. Speaker on. 3 rings. My mother answered. Hello? Mrs. Reeves, this is Renata Holt. I'm the founding partner at Mercer and Holt Creative. I'm calling because I need to verify something related to both of your daughters. A pause. Okay. Did Vanessa send you a text message in January asking you to offer Nadia a damaged bag before her meeting here to affect the impression she made? The silence on the other end was the silence of someone calculating, not denying, calculating. I had heard that silence my whole life and never known what it was until right now. She mentioned something, my mother said. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. She said she just didn't want Nadia to get her hopes up about something that might not work out. So, yes, Renata said. Another pause. Yes. Renata thanked her and ended the call. Vanessa was on her feet before the line disconnected. Her chair pushed back hard against the floor, a sharp scraping sound that carried through the glass wall into the open office. I saw 2 people at nearby desks look up. This is completely out of proportion. Her voice had changed again. The wound was gone. What was underneath it was something raw. She went through Mom's private messages. That's a violation. That's what we should be talking about. You're all sitting here treating me like a criminal over a bio on a website, while she's the one who— Vanessa, Renata said. Just the name. Nothing else. Vanessa stopped. The room was quiet. Joelle was writing without looking up. Simone was looking at the table. Renata was watching Vanessa with the same clinical steadiness I'd seen on my first day in that lobby. Nobody spoke. Nobody came to Vanessa's defense. She looked around the room for something to hold on to, and found nothing. I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I'd thought about this moment over the weekend. Not what I would say dramatically, just what was true and what needed to be said clearly, once. You used my community college, I said. My print shop. My process. My no safety net. You wore my life into every room in this building for 4 years. And when I walked in here with a real portfolio and a real pitch, you made sure I showed up looking like exactly what you'd been telling people I was. I paused. You built your reputation here on my story, and then you tried to make sure I couldn't build anything on it myself. Vanessa looked at me. Her hands were at her sides. For the first time I could remember, she had nothing ready. That story is mine, I said. You don't get to use it anymore. Renata spoke into the quiet. Vanessa, you're suspended effective immediately, pending a full review. Joelle will contact you about the process. Please collect your personal items from your desk. Vanessa picked up her bag. She didn't look at me again. She walked to the door, opened it, and crossed through the glass-walled hallway into the open office. I watched through the window. The whole floor could see her. She walked with her head straight, her pace even, the way she always moved when she was performing composure. But her hands were shaking. She walked past her desk without stopping, past the colleagues who had heard her speak at all hands meetings about resilience and building from nothing, past the junior staff she had mentored about the value of hard work and self-reliance. She walked through the main door, and it closed behind her. Megan had given a standing ovation at her talk last year. I thought about that. Renata looked at me. She closed the folder on the table in front of her. The contract is yours, she said, if you want it. I said yes. The fallout started that same evening. My mother called at 6:47. I was back in my apartment, sitting at my desk, still in the blazer I'd worn to the meeting. I let it ring once, then answered. You humiliated your sister in front of her entire office. Her voice was tight. Not the careful voice she used at dinners, or the soft voice she used when she wanted something from me. The real one. The one underneath all the managed versions. Do you understand what you've done? She built that career. She worked for 4 years at that company, and you walked in there and tore it down in one morning. I let her finish. She built it on my life, Mom. That is not what happened. It is exactly what happened. I have the screenshots. I have the enrollment records. I have 4 years of her telling rooms full of people that she went to community college and worked at a print shop, which is my life, not hers. I have the text where she told you to give me a broken bag to make sure I didn't get the contract. Silence. My dad's voice somewhere in the background. Quiet, flat. Just let it go, Carol. The family motto. Still working, still being deployed. I did what any mother would do, my mom said. Her voice shifted into something defensive and a little smaller. I was trying to protect Vanessa. She has worked so hard, and she needed you to help her sabotage me? It wasn't like that. You texted back, okay, and I'll do it tomorrow. That's what it was like. Another silence. Longer this time. Nadia, families protect each other. That's what you do. You protect the people who need it. I needed it too, I said. For 31 years, I needed it too. She didn't have an answer for that. I could hear her breathing. I could hear my dad's television in the background, and the sound of a chair moving. The ordinary sounds of the house I grew up in. The house where there had always been enough for everyone. Except me. If you want to talk to me again, I said, it starts with the truth. Not the version where Vanessa worked hard and I was the problem. The real version. And until you're ready for that conversation, I don't have anything else to say right now. She started to respond. I didn't let her finish. I hung up. I set the phone face down on my desk, screen toward the wood. I sat in the quiet of my apartment for a while. The lamp I'd picked out, the prints on the wall, the dark green paint behind my monitor. I had chosen every single thing in this room. Nothing had been handed down. Nothing had been offered with conditions attached. Nothing had someone else's name stitched inside the collar. I stayed with that for a few minutes. Then I made dinner and went to bed. 3 days later, Simone texted me. She'd heard from someone at the firm that Vanessa had been formally terminated after the review confirmed the discrepancies in her hiring materials and performance documentation. The bio had been part of her initial pitch when she'd interviewed 4 years ago, it turned out. She'd walked into Mercer and Holt with that story ready from the first day. The print shop, the community college, the built herself from nothing framing. It had been her entry point, and she'd maintained it for 4 years, because it had worked, and nobody had ever checked. Her LinkedIn went quiet within 48 hours of the termination. I didn't look for it. Simone mentioned it, and I noted it and moved on. What came next surprised me. About a week after everything, my Aunt Patricia called. She was the one person in my family who had always asked real questions and listened to the answers. 4th grade teacher, San Marcos, the Subaru with the Folk Festival bumper sticker. She called on a Sunday evening, the way she always did, but this time her voice had a different quality to it. Careful, like she'd been rehearsing. I owe you something, she said. I've owed it to you for a while, and I kept telling myself it wasn't my place, and I'm done telling myself that. I waited. About a year ago, I was on the phone with your mother. She thought she'd hung up, but she hadn't. I heard her telling Vanessa that you'd submitted a proposal to a firm in Austin, a big one, and Vanessa said, let me handle it. Your mom said okay. I didn't hear all of it, but I heard enough. She paused. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was family business and not my lane, and I've been carrying that ever since. I closed my eyes. Let me handle it. You should have told me, I said, but I kept my voice even. I wasn't angry at Patricia. She was the only one who had ever been in my corner at all. I know. I'm sorry. I was afraid of starting something I couldn't finish. She was quiet for a second. You were always the one who actually did the work, Nadia, even when you were small. You figured things out, and you didn't complain, and I think everyone in that family took advantage of the fact that you were quiet about it. Quiet doesn't mean okay. I knew that. I should have said something. Thank you for saying it now, I said. We talked for another 40 minutes, about ordinary things mostly. Her students, a road trip she was planning, a book she'd finished. The conversation felt like breathing after being somewhere with bad air for too long. When we hung up, I sat for a while and thought about what she'd said. Quiet doesn't mean okay. I'd spent years mistaking my own silence for acceptance, letting the absence of protest get interpreted as contentment. The thing about being the invisible one is that you start to collaborate with your own invisibility without realizing it. You stop saying things because no one asks. You stop expecting things because they never came. And somewhere along the way, the silence stops being a choice and starts being a habit. I was done with the habit. My first official day as a contractor at Mercer and Holt was a Monday in late February. I wore a blazer I'd bought myself, dark gray, fitted, no drama. I brought my own bag. I brought my laptop, company issued, new. And I brought my old iPad, the one with the cracked screen. I set it on the desk beside the new laptop, and I left it there. Someone on the team noticed it the first week, a junior copywriter named Dex who sat 2 desks over. He looked at it and said, "Is that for work?" I said no. I said it was a record. He didn't ask what I meant by that, but I didn't need him to. I knew what I meant. Every project I'd ever built was on that screen. Every late night, every client I'd chased down and delivered for, every dollar I'd earned before anyone at a company like this knew my name. The cracks were part of it. You don't erase the record just because the chapter is over. Renata stopped by my desk on that first Thursday. She didn't say anything significant. She looked at what I was working on, asked one question about the direction I was taking on a messaging project, said the instinct was right, and moved on. That was it. That was enough. Simone and I had lunch that Friday. We sat outside at a place on East 6th and ate tacos and talked about nothing important for most of it. Toward the end, she said, "How are you actually doing?" I thought about it, honestly, before I answered. "I'm good," I said. Not the polite version. Actually good. She nodded. She believed me. I could tell because she didn't push further. She just said, "Good," and reached for her drink. My mother called once more, about 3 weeks after the Monday meeting. Her voice was different this time. Not defensive. Not managed. Tired, mostly. She said she'd been thinking. She said she knew things hadn't been fair. She said she loved me. She said she hoped I knew that. I told her I'd heard her. I told her love wasn't the question. The question was whether she was willing to look at what had actually happened, not the version that protected everyone's feelings, but the real version. I told her when she was ready for that conversation, I'd be here for it. I told her I wasn't chasing it and I wasn't holding my breath, but I wasn't closing the door either. She said she understood. I don't know if she did, but I meant what I said. I wasn't chasing reconciliation. I wasn't rebuilding anything on a foundation that hadn't been examined. If she got there, I'd be willing to talk. If she didn't, my life was going to continue either way. Vanessa never called. I didn't expect her to. I want to say something before I finish this, and I'm going to try to say it without it sounding like a speech, because I don't think what happened to me is a lesson so much as it's just what it was. But here's what I know from being on the other side of it. There is a particular kind of invisible that happens inside families. It's not the dramatic kind. It's not the kind you can point to and name easily. It's the kind where everyone is fed and housed and technically cared for, But one person is consistently the least important one in every room, where their news gets redirected, their achievements get minimized, their story gets borrowed without asking, where the silence they've learned to keep gets mistaken for having nothing to say. If that's your family, I want you to hear this. The quiet you've been keeping is not the same as having nothing. It's just that you learned a long time ago that what you built wasn't going to be celebrated in that house, so you built it anyway, and you stopped announcing it. And that is a form of strength that is hard to explain to people who've never had to practice it. But it is real, and it is yours. Nobody gets to wear your story. Not your sister, not your parent, not anyone who thought your silence meant your life was theirs to use. You lived it. You built it. The cracks and the safety pins and the binder clips and the cracked screen, all of it is yours. I still have that iPad on my desk. I'm not getting rid of it. If this story landed somewhere real for you, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've been the invisible one in your family. Tell me seen if you know what I mean when I talk about being overlooked by the people who should have been looking the hardest. I read every single comment, and I mean that. Subscribe if you want more of this. I'll be back when I have something worth saying. Take care of yourselves.